ASCENT podcast. My name is Brian, and I'll be your guide as we continue to work our way towards self excellence. Were you aware that 95% of the people in the world actually have self limiting beliefs? And this is according to some research done by Tony Robbins, who's a renowned coach and also author. And that's what his information has kind of found in his work over the years, that 95% actually have limiting beliefs about themselves and their capabilities. What's interesting about that is, a limiting belief is just your negative thoughts, um, ideas that may be holding you back personally that sometimes you might be aware of. Other times it could be happening subconsciously. And also, Gallup did a poll, and Gallup being one of the world's largest research companies, of 10,000 people. And in their surveys, they found that these are the top things that people have limiting beliefs around. Number one is that I'm not smart enough. Two, I'm not good enough. Three, I'm not capable enough. Four, I'm not worthy of success. And the one that really surprises me says, I am not deserving of love. And I think those are really big and very important things. The good news is there's something we can do about it. And that's what we want to talk about today. There are ways that we can kind of challenge those limiting beliefs, figure out what the root causes of some of those beliefs are, and start to replace them with more positive, more productive beliefs. And that's what our session is going to be about today. So stick around. Let's get into it. Good morning, guys. How everybody doing? Good to see you.
Morning.
So let's jump into it. I want to start talking about this because limiting beliefs is something I think most people don't realize that such a large percentage of the population, you know, is subject to that, having some type of personal belief or limitation in their own thought process as to what they're capable of or what they're deserving of. I think that's a very fascinating fact. So I'm going to come to you first, Van, and then I'll come to Erica next, just to kind of tell what your thoughts are. And are you surprised to hear that it's such a large percentage of people who have that? And also maybe why you think that is, that we suffer from having these types of limiting beliefs. So, Vinny, what about you? What are your thoughts on that?
Hey, Brian, I'm not surprised. When you think about the changes throughout history and the changes around culture, you think about most of our education system is built off of basically a World War II industrial mentality. You think about the changes we've been seeing with, the Great Resignation, for example, and this outcry for inclusivity. For me personally, this is pretty important kind of subject that I've been going down. I've actually really gone down the rabbit hole around better understanding Marcus Aurelius and his book Meditations. So for those of you who don't know, Marcus Aurelius is the Roman emperor who over 2,300 years ago, while he was emperor, was writing his journal, his kind of an internal kind of self-reflections, hence the term meditations. And Emperor Marcus Aurelius, on his deathbed, told his advisors that, once he passes, to burn these these books. But unfortunately, they did not do that. Unfortunately, people started reading and understanding how this individual at the time, who was in so much power, was understanding how to be a better human, how to be a better, everything. And so the term Stoicism came to be. And I've just been going down the whole Stoic rabbit hole. And, I was, as I mentioned before, I was at Burning Man and I went to a camp called Camp Ganesh, and they actually gave me a little Stoic cheat sheet. So I'm not going to go into a lot of the details for you, but the one thing that I appreciate about Stoicism is there's a popular theme quote where you can't control other people. What you can control is your own reaction to what they're doing to you or with you. And so that's really where, when we talk about limiting beliefs, when we talk about the self-sabotage that we seem to do to ourselves, the questioning of are we good enough or enough for success and love, that's really where the root cause is this, our upbringing, when the people in our lives are telling us, oh, to be careful, or, oh, you can't achieve this, or stay in your lane, or whatnot. That's to me where, this cultural shift is really evolving to. I'll pause there.
Thanks for sharing that, man. You're absolutely right. And I think a lot of it does come from, as we talked on a previous podcast, what culture within your family and those kinds of things that you were raised in or under, I think definitely impact that. Erica, what about you? What would you like to share as far as that percentage, and was that a surprise to you? And why do you think that is?
That's not a surprise. That's not a surprise to me. I found that regardless of people's backgrounds or how much money they have or where they grew up, who their parents were, that most people have um, an inner lack of confidence for whatever reason, whether it's what their parents told them or what other people have told them. And some people just innately don't have that sense of confidence or self love, and
Mm-hmm.
the external factors impacts that. So regardless of who they are, I haven't met a person yet who doesn't have that challenge. I don't. I haven't.
That's interesting. So you think it's really just rooted in the human nature, or would you say it's more of environment as to how they were raised?
I think it's both. I think it's both. I think people are born and they observe their environments and they figure out ways to survive, and so they're questioning themselves as to what is the best way for me to survive, and why am I not doing better? What am I lacking? And I think
Mm,
that maybe it's a survival instinct. And as we grow, I agree with Andy, as we grow a little older, um, it's beneficial for us to realize that it's not about what we lack as much as what are we willing to let go? Like, what beliefs are we willing to let go? Like, what does it benefit me? What does this lack of confidence benefit? What is this fear? What do I gain from this feeling? And a lot of times, people just don't ask themselves those questions.
thank you for sharing that. Chris, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, this is kind of a hard one for me. Um, when I look at the subject matter that we're talking about today, for me, I got to go all the way back to the beginning when I was a young man, knee high to a cat. And I think it starts with the family dynamic. Now, I grew up in a household where the women primarily ran the show, which is not necessarily a bad thing. So I don't want to get off on that one. And like, what do you do? What are you saying? I'm not saying that's a bad thing. What I want to say is it has its own share of limitations, because and when I mean limitations, I mean in the messaging. So now my mother, I think my mother, I always have to look back. If there's things that my mother did that I absolutely can't stand, and it left me scratching my head in a lot of instances. But I also have to remind myself that my mother, for whatever the reason being, uh, fell into that single mother trying to raise an only child, and what those challenges were because of the fact that she had me so young, and she was trying to figure out who she was. In the same time, she was trying to raise this being, this entity, this force of nature. Because I was somewhat of a force of nature as a young boy. You're curious. I mean, for one, I'm a boy. For two, I'm most boys are curious, and I'm if you didn't keep me kind of corralled in, and I wasn't a bad kid, but you have propensities to run amok a little bit. You know what I mean? And it was, I always say, I suffer from the you tell me to go left, I'm going to automatically go right rule. So those type of things. And then the other thing was there was a couple more components for me as this is me looking at this recently, is that I came to a conclusion that I didn't get enough discipline. I mean, some kids like, you get too much. I actually think I didn't get enough of it. I don't think that I was called out on my stuff enough. You know, it was like, you know, you get caught on something and it's like, okay, you did that and blah, blah, blah. And I never got a chance to talk it through. And I think that's the thing that really I had problems with, is just that dynamic, that banter back and forth between parent and offspring. So I don't think I benefit from it. I actually think in some ways it's limited and hindered some of my growth. Now, I've been fighting that uphill battle for a considerable amount of time. That the first thing is actually recognize that you fall into that category, and then the next thing is, well, what do we do about it?
Right.
So this is the age-old question. I wake up to this question and answer session a lot of days, more often than not. And some days I do really, really well with it, and some days I suck with it. You know, so but I am at this point in my life so committed to trying to be that better person, because I know that better person is in me. I know he's there. So that's part. So whatever belief system I was handed, it definitely is in, you know, it's in a manner that I know there is better for me as a human being, and it's up to me to try to figure out how to get to it.
Absolutely. Chris, thanks for sharing that. And I want to jump in there too, because some people may be asking or wanting kind of a better definition or clarification on what a limiting belief might be. And Chris, you touched on something there, talking about the family dynamic and, you know, how you were raised and what that internal culture of might have been within your family unit, et cetera. And like you, I was also an only child. So a limiting belief for me that took me a long time to understand was being an only child, I didn't have to compete for time and for attention and for those type things. So in one way, that might have been a good thing. But I think the shortfall, the shortcoming that came out of that was, as I got older, that not wanting to compete kind of put me in a place where I didn't have a voice, because I never had to compete for time or state my opinions and all of those type things in an environment that was competitive with having siblings and that type thing. So all the way, I would say, even through my 20s, I really was in a limiting belief that I didn't have a voice. What I had to share or to say didn't really have any value. And that just, I think, grew out of that family environment that I grew up in. In my 30s, I kind of realized that, you know, I did have something to share and to say. But here's what's interesting. As I reflect back on that and I started to, quote unquote, express my voice and say the things that I had to say, I would only most times say it from a factual standpoint. So I would express fact-based things. I still wasn't comfortable enough to believe that my opinion, my personal opinion on things mattered. And it really probably was once I got maybe to my 40s, where I started to realize, you know what, I have a voice, I have an opinion, I have a platform, I have things that I want to share or say or put out into the universe, and I'm entitled to do that. So it took decades to get past something that I think really was instilled as a young person. And Chris, we were talking kind of before we started this, that old saying, especially from grandparents and our generation, was, you know, children are to be seen and not heard. And that was one thing that we used to hear a lot of growing up. So you kind of sat there in the corner and said nothing. So getting past that belief has taken a lot of work and a lot of time for me. Can anyone else relate to, you know, having that or story or something that they might want to share from a limiting belief standpoint? Vince?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, as you both were talking, I was thinking about, you know, how I'm raising my kids and the words I use. And, you know, sometimes, especially when you think about this limiting belief or this not enough or this more negativity, and in my book, I view that as kind of fear-based. So it's the fear of or not wanting to fail. And that's really what all this kind of comes down to, is that we're afraid of failure. We're afraid of falling down. We're afraid of being viewed as someone who hasn't been accomplished anything. And that's just not right in my book. You know, when we think about the greatest times where we have that support network and that structure and that, you know, who's got our back, and we think about the words that we want to hear, you know, it's like, you can do this, you got this. You know, that's to me where the cultural change, of course, happens with you inside first, in your subconscious. And that's it, decades, maybe even a lifetime, maybe future lifetimes, I don't know. But, you know, someone told me this recently where, and I can reflect this as a parent as well, when you've got the little kid who's holding the glass thing, and I'm definitely someone who's done this, where it's like, oh, don't drop that, don't drop that. So you're always thinking about, you know, the worst case scenario or what will happen versus saying, you know, hold on tight. So how do you flip the narrative to be more of a positive of what you want to do? And then as a parent, the story was, you know, when you say, oh, don't drop this, of course they're going to drop it because that's where it's going. Or, you know, if you hold on to that negative side of things, it always ends up that way. You know, you manifest what you don't want. Or the flip side of it too is you see yourself in others. You see the things you don't like in others, and that's why it irks you.
100%. Chris, you had something to add on top of that?
Yes, I do. Listen, one of the things when I heard what I just heard from you, Vinny, was you talking about the fear of failure. I want to do you one better, and this is what I primarily suffer through: the fear of success.
Mm.
I know how to fail. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur. I've been, you know, running around the entrepreneurial world for the last two plus decades, and obviously you've fallen down. You know, with you're in that, or just any arena, you're going to fall down, and usually are you going to get back up? Now, my challenge has been over that I've recognized over this last decade is it's not the fear of failure, it's the fear of succeeding, because and then that kind of bleeds into almost, and I don't want to go back, but it kind of feeds into the imposter syndrome. You know, I'm fearing that the fear of succession will expose me as being less than what I portray. Now, that doesn't mean I'm a fraud. It doesn't even I don't even want you to think that I think I'm a fraud or anything there, because I actually believe I'm very genuine. And that's what I hang my hat on, is my ability to be genuine pretty much all the time. But I get caught up. I'm getting caught up right now. I've got a couple projects I'm working on. Actually, I'm working on projects with you, with Vinny and Brian. We've got some things we're working on. And I'm freaked out. Right, I get a little freaked out every once in a while about, you know, being good enough, being smart enough, being deserving of the opportunity and or the rewards from that opportunity is where I'm getting hung up. And it's right now because, well, here's the thing. Some of the stuff that's being worked on, I actually think that there is a high probability of achievement, and that's got me twisted up. I'm like Dale. I'm like, I have to have these self-reinforcing conversations with myself as well as the people that are surrounding me. And the thing that I don't want to go on a rant here, but the thing that I hang my hat on is that I got some good people around me who know me enough to allow me to be myself and allow me to share those insecurities and inadequacies and help to reinforce that I am good enough. But I don't think a lot of people as a whole think, when they think failure and success in the same thing. It's always you're going to fail, you know. And so that's kind of the deal for me. I'm really wondering what's going to happen when we succeed at whatever it is that we're trying to do right now. What am I going to do when I get to this plateau?
Chris, I got a follow-up question to that, because that's great. And fear of success is, a lot of people don't realize how that plays into their lives a lot of the times. Would you say that the undercurrent to that is more about the new level of expectation that's placed because you essentially, because you succeed, you basically elevated your status in whatever realm that looks like. So that then puts you in a different space where maybe the expectations change. So is that where you think the fear is coming from, or you think it's coming from somewhere else?
Well, I think that is a huge part of it. I also think that it's in my mind because I've got these limiting beliefs that I think that there's a part of me that, because, hey, I'll be honest, I haven't graduated from college. I mean, I've been doing continuing learning forever. I consider myself a kind of a book smart person, but I literally think somebody's going to, I'm going to get to this level. And then, for one thing is when you get to that level, you actually have to that's where the work comes in. You have to maintain it. So it makes you more responsible. You know what I mean? I think the pressure's a little higher. And I think sometimes that that really is something that if you end up focusing on that, it starts to trip you up a little bit.
No, that makes perfect sense. So, because I want to jump in there too, and that's an interesting thing because I hear two pieces to that. There is, I think, a concern of judgment that's there, and then there sounds like there is a piece of, am I deserving of, for whatever the reasons are. And I think that's part of what we're talking about today is just with those limiting beliefs. The first thing you have to really do is challenge them. That's the term that they use to get over a limiting belief. You have to challenge it, meaning, is it true or not? What is it rooted in? And what is rooted in? Is it something that is just in your mind and it's not really a truth? Or is it really something concrete that is true, that you're challenging that particular limiting belief? So that's kind of the way I think I would phrase that to you, Chris, is to really start to think about, challenge those limitations and say, well, is that a truth? Or is it really just something that is between the 6 inches here and I'm telling myself that that's what it is, right? And kind of looking at it from that standpoint.
Well, if you don't mind me chiming in again.
Yeah, absolutely.
I honestly believe it's in between my ears. That's it. I'm the one that I have complete. Well, I won't say I have complete charge of this situation, but I'm smart enough to know where it's coming from. It's between my ears. It started decades ago. I've been trying to grow through it, rise above it. But my new rallying cry right now is, why not me? Why am I any less deserving than the next man? I mean, things come and go, ideas come and go, but I'm really trying to reinforce myself today with, why not me? Why I deserve, and you take the question out of it. I'm saying I deserve this. I deserve to win just as much as the next person.
No, that makes perfect sense. So I want to throw another question out to the group, and Eric, I'll come to you with this one first. Because I think another way to look at it, we talked about challenging those limiting beliefs. So that's one thing to think about, and to how rooted in truth is that limitation that you have, and just trying to work your way through that. The other piece of it, I think, is value, and understanding and starting to appreciate your value, how you value not only yourself, but what value you bring to whatever it may be, whether it's work, whether it's family, et cetera, et cetera. So Erica, from your chair and in your experiences, how have you had to, manage that, prove that, show that, and get comfortable with bringing and having that value and how that plays into your daily life?
Well, that's taken a while for me. Yeah. And I'm naturally an extrovert, and I think people would, looking at me, probably think that I've just had a wealth of confidence, right? Because I have loving parents and everything. But even, for me, even as an extrovert, it's really taken time to hone in on that. Questioning, like Chris had shared, am I smart enough, or am I pretty enough? Am I nice enough? And really, it's taken, this is my 5th decade. And I still have learned that I have to place my value upon who created me. And that God, when I was born, said that this is good, period. Not this is good, but, it could be a little better. It was like, this is good. And every day I have to lean upon that, because you're always going to have people that don't like you or say you could do this or that. I had a close friend on one of the videos. I was like, hey, did you watch the video? He was like, yeah, but how come your face was a different color than your neck? So I was like, oh, okay. So I ran out to the makeup counter. And that was truly said out of love. That was not a man. He said it out of love. Your face really should be the same color as your neck. But I have to daily base my value upon the belief that the Creator knew exactly what He was doing. So that's early when I said I've never met someone who didn't have a self-limiting belief. I honestly, that was the truth. I've never met someone who was 100% confident. I don't care how much money they have in the bank. I don't care what their titles are, where they work. I don't care. Every person that I've met has something that is a challenge to them to get over. And earlier we were talking about parenting. And I think as parents, it's important that our children know that we value them, we believe in them, but also it's important that they see us work through things. Like let your kids see you practice, rehearse, ask them, hey, would you listen to this segment? Would you, hey, how is this outfit? Do you think that this will look okay? Your kids, once they become middle schoolers, they'll be happy to tell you, that's not, I don't think you should be wearing that tie, Dad, or that shoe, that shoe doesn't go with that dress, Mom. Where you going with that? Include them so that they can learn that we're not these totally invincible people that just always figure we can get it right. I know a couple of years ago, my daughter helped me put together an outfit. I had to go to an event. And then I got to the event, and then I was in my car, and I called her. And I said, I'm a bit nervous. I'm nervous. And my daughter's an introvert. I'm an extrovert. So she thinks that I can just walk into a room and just do anything, right? Because introverts think extroverts have something magical, and we don't. So I call her. I'm like, well, I'm nervous. She's like, Mama, you got this. Mommy, you got this. You can do this. You look great. You practice. And I really needed to hear that. So I think as parents, it's important that our children know that we don't always have it 100% together, that we have to take time out and we practice, and we actually have to psych up ourselves to perform. So that they know it's okay if they have to do it too, But you asked me about value, and that's what I've been doing to help myself get through things.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Vince, what about you?
It's so interesting hearing that comment about you asking your daughter for advice and support. And that's definitely something that I think about often with my kids too. And, especially since my oldest is an introvert as well. And the two boys are very kind of across the lines, both extroverts and introvert too. And, I thought a long time ago when I was growing up, it was always about, oh, don't cry, or don't show your feelings, or feelings are, less than or whatnot. And that goes back to the cultural comment about, be a man or whatever. And when you think about, well, what has all of that culture provided today, where, based on the data, we're at this crazy, crazy level of mental health crises and depression and anxiety and suicidal thoughts. And I'm a huge data person. So when I see this and I hear this and I look at 95% have limiting beliefs, they're all interconnected. So for us to be able to truly show our kids, what it's like to grow up and live through this, and allow them to figure stuff out and fail. And that mental resiliency piece for me, I think, is the most important above all, because we're not going to be there, throughout their entire lives to hold their hand and be there. And I never wanted to be a helicopter parent. That's for one thing too, because I want them to go off. And that's part of the beauty of it. I think that's really the, changing that fear base into that challenge base. It's like, how do you look at what can I learn from this experience? What is it that is going to mold me and make me better? And, if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. So, really changing that kind of like, okay, this sucks. Like, we're not gonna lie about this. This is a sucky situation, but, we're gonna get through this. And it goes back to, doing it where you're not alone is so much better. But as you said, sharing your process, sharing your understanding, seeing your vulnerability. So, for me, actually, especially around this thing, Brene Brown has been a huge, huge resource for me, just to kind of understand. And she's a shame researcher. So I don't know. Have you guys watched or heard anything about Brene?
I've just seen a few of her interviews. I need to get her books.
Yeah, do the TED Talk. It's so good.
Okay, I'll check it out.
Yeah, she is great. Ben, I want to follow up with a question, and kind of based on a conversation I was having with some friends last night. And we were all talking about our children, and we're all at the age now where our children are adults. And we were kind of just reflecting on kind of a time and a place where we would intentionally expose our children to different cultures, different ideas, take them to the opera, take them to the ballet, take them to the museums. And obviously when they were 10, no, I don't want to go to the, right? But it's always interesting that when they become 25, they reflect back and they talk so fondly about those experiences, right? So I want to kind of hear your input, Vince. It's just to, your boys at the age that they are now. And is that something that you as a parent are intentionally doing and pushing them into places that they probably don't want to go, but long term you think it's going to be beneficial just for them to experience some things? And also based on what we're talking about today, I think that will help them with their limiting beliefs just because of the experience and the exposure of it. What are your thoughts on that?
The kid's mom is really good at changing the narrative, and Lisa is able to, instead of making this a chore, how do you change it to like, oh my gosh, like, let me tell you about this. And a lot of this is, I've always believed this, is if you talk to your kids like, less than citizens, where it's this control function where you're saying, you got to do this, or, do as I say, don't do as I do, all these things, then you raise them this culture of, feeling like they can talk to others like this, versus you speak to them as adults. You speak to them as your friend. You speak to them as someone who you just met from another country where they don't quite understand. There's a language component, there's a cultural component, there's a knowledge piece. And you help them understand this. And when you have this level of like, oh, this is the most amazing thing, and you tell them stories about your own, and you tell them about how you at first thought it was, going to be terrible, but you found out it was going to be amazing. Like, I brought my middle child to this teacher appreciation for his school, and at first he was like, no, I don't want to go. I'm like, oh, but we're going to make musubis, and he loves musubis, and he's like, oh, tell me more about that, and we're going to do this, and you're going to talk, you're going to hang out with your teachers. And he's like, oh, no, I don't want that. I'm like, well, but then afterwards, I could see him, and he's like, I'm so glad you took me, and thank you for taking me. And I'm like, wow, thanks, and he had the best time, and he had enjoyed it, and that level of community giving and service. So, I'm still figuring out how to change my mentality, where I'm trying to untangle all the things that how I was raised. And, that's the thing about parenting. We have to think as a parent myself now, I reflect back on how I was raised, and I'm like, okay, yeah, there's no like how-to guide, So I have a lot more empathy for parents out there that are first time, and yeah, it's not easy.
No, it's not easy. And, Chris and I were talking earlier, and Erica, you have one daughter, right? So an only child. So
Yeah,
we can
but
all relate.
I do laugh at people who have several children and maybe there's a little age gap, because by the time they get to that last one, it's like they're totally different people, parents.
Yeah.
Like they're just like all those old rules. They're like, oh, whatever.
Yeah.
They get
Yeah.
a totally different kind of parent by
Yeah.
the time you get to child 5 or 6.
Yeah. There's a TV commercial like that. And every time I see it, I laugh because it shows like the first child, and they're packing to go somewhere, and they literally almost have a moving van full of stuff with all of the stuff for the kid. Then they show child number 2, and it's like a third of that. And then child number 3, they've got one of those strap things for the kid and a bag this big, and they hit the door. And they've just learned through the process, of how they manage it. So I wanted to bring that up because talking about Vinny and then the rest of us here, Chris and myself, being only children, and then Erica obviously only having the one daughter, and then Vince, you're in a different place. You have multiple children. From a parenting standpoint, especially when we talk about instilling beliefs and what the culture, each one of those personalities is a different personality. So how do you go about addressing that with your parenting style, and what skills have you had to develop to be able to do that?
Well, I always joke, especially when you go past 2 kids and you hit that third one, it's no longer man defense. You're doing zone. You're just trying to figure out how to keep by and whatnot. And I think parenting is probably one of the greatest self-reflection experiences one can ever attain. And all the quotes and whatnot are spot on. And no one can ever really understand it until you become a parent. So, I believe that being and seeing the changes and the different personalities is obviously one of the greatest gifts, because you can see yourselves in them based on your little, how they do things, their little smirks, their little reactions. And, again, they are modeling. You as a parent are the first model for them. So, as Erica was mentioning, just allowing them to see you and understand your thought process. And a lot of times, you're just winging it. A lot of times you're trying to figure, what's best, or you're modeling someone else's. But they're going to be their own person, and that was one of the priorities for me too, is being around for the first 5 years, because the data shows that their values really get instilled in those first 5 years. So, and then from those values, now you've got the whole, the programming side or the thinking side. So how they think about things, but that's also where you get a lot of your, the fears. And then it expands out there.
Yeah, very, very, very true with the fears. I want to share a little bit of a story. I have 3 kids, right? And they are born roughly 5 to 6 years apart. So 15-year period when you look at it from that standpoint. And culturally, I experienced the evolution of just how things are today. When my daughter, who's the oldest, was born, it was the father waits in this room, my wife goes and she's going through the whole birthing process. And the first time I see the baby is like the old TV shows through the glass, like, oh, look, right? So my older son was born 5 or 6 years later. They put him in the room. They did put him in some scrubs and this kind of thing. At some point in this process, we're going to take you into the room, right? So literally almost at the time of birth, they bring me in and blah, 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 and et cetera, et cetera. And then my youngest son was born, it's like, okay, we're gonna dress you up. You're gonna get in here, and and it's like I'm doing this and doing that and helping them breathe and feeding ice chips. I mean, it was a whole different experience. I cut the umbilical cord. I'm looking at the doctor and say, "What the hell am I paying you for?" I mean, because I've been here doing all the work. But just such a different evolution of the experience. And I wanted to bring that in from a beliefs and culture standpoint, because as a parent, I think it actually, even from that day one, gives you a different perspective and a different bond with the appreciation for what goes on for the mom having the baby. Because in the old days, men didn't know what that process was like because we didn't see it. We, the glass and like, oh, the baby's here kind of thing, right? Totally different when you're in there with them for 2 hours and the pushing and the breathing and ice chips and everything else that has to go on. And, so I think it bonds you and gives you a whole different perspective. So talking about the beliefs you may have and going back to, especially if it's your first child, am I good enough? Am I going to be a good dad? Am I, so you have all those limiting beliefs that you have to get past too. So something I think about that experience of being there when it's all happening kind of alleviate some of that in some way. And if that's the best word I can say it, and that's just based on my personal experience. But yeah, a very interesting journey as far as that goes. So let's transition a little bit, because I want to talk a little bit about, obviously we have the limiting beliefs. And I brought up earlier about challenging them, because that's what they say you really need to do to start to work your way to get past it. And so when I throw that out there, and Chris, I'll come to you first, and then we'll get to the rest of the folks there. If someone were to say, all right, you need to challenge your limiting beliefs, Chris, from your mindset, what would that look like? How would you go about challenging a limiting belief? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think one of the first things is it has to do with, I think we all have goals. I think we're definitely at an age where you should have formed some goals. The thing that I always go back to in my mind is that, the way society is set up, I think we're set up to be negative. I mean, it's just that simple. And the challenge for me is to turn to turn my thinking into positive, even down to the simplest things of responding to someone's question or query or advice. I keep thinking of, like, I've got a 30-something-year-old daughter, and dealing with a 30-something-year-old daughter that you were estranged from for the better part of 10 plus years. I've been trying to make up ground with her for the last 10 years, up and including trying to figure out how to communicate with her on a day in and day out basis and not necessarily be an authoritarian, because that's the environment that I came out of. My mother was an authority. My grandmother was an authority. My grandfather was an authority. My auntie was an authority. So I had all these authority figures around me. And you, like you said, Brian, earlier about children should be seen and not heard. Well, I definitely came out of that time and dynamic. My opinion was never asked. So that's how all my thinking has been formed, is that I don't really have an opinion to give, or more importantly, my opinion is maybe not valuable or as valuable as I think it is. So that's the challenge for me on many fronts. So what I've been working on over this last 2 years for me, I've been working on just the, trying to, first and foremost, being self-aware about all these things that are around, these things, these emotions, these hurdles, these challenges that are swirling around me on a daily basis, and changing how you respond. Because we're from our early age, I think we're predisposed to respond a certain way. And it typically starts out as something negative, even though you can be asked about something positive. We're going to literally shade over to the negative side of a response, as opposed to finding a reinforcing response. Even though there's negativity within that construct, being able to lead in with the positive part of it. Hey, let me give you something positive to chew on, and then we can discuss the negative parts of it. I think we're wired the exact opposite. We're going to give you the negative stuff first, and if we're lucky, we're going to get to the positive. And I underline if we're lucky, because your brain is it's going in it's being pulled the opposite direction. And that's, my daily struggle when someone, and I have these in-depth conversations. And like I said, I started out talking about my daughter. She's a wonderful 30-something, but one little, I won't call it a fun fact, I left her mother because of our parenting styles. Her mother wanted to keep her in the dark, and I wanted to show her what the world was really about. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Because I wanted her to know what she was facing. And her mother didn't want to do that. And we fought vehemently over that. And I drew a line in the sand. I just had to, because I knew what I had gone through as a young person, and what I strived for, what I needed, what I ultimately really desired to have from the support that I desired to have from those parental figures over top of me that I didn't get. I have a story. I don't want to slow this thing down, but when we get back to a little story time, I have a little story that'll tell you it'll really kind of hit home with what I experienced as a teenager. One of my options that I wasn't given until I stumbled upon it as a 30-something-year-old person.
Got you. Well, Chris, it's interesting you brought that up, because talking about, parenting styles and how that could obviously play into limiting beliefs or that piece. And then another thing you said was negativity. And that goes back to something I think Vince mentioned earlier as well, talking about how sometimes we always immediately go to that side of, it's like if say, I'm going to go camping, and the first thing somebody says is, well, watch out for the mountain lions, not enjoy the stars. It's just something that's simple, but that's exactly what we're talking about, is the response that's there comes from this place of the negative side versus the positive side of things. Because going camping, the stars are amazing, right? Are there mountain lions? Possibly, yes, right? But why is it that we kind of always fall to that side of negativity? That piece, I don't know. Erica, Vince, you guys have any thoughts or comments on either of those things?
Sure. Well, for me, when I find myself experiencing those beliefs, what I end up having to do is get a piece of paper, and I have to write out what I believe, and then I have to, or what I'm feeling, and then I have to write a list of the truth, like what is true, a part of what am I feeling at that moment? What are the things I know are true? And then I really have to focus on that right side of the list until I come out of it. Because as optimistic as I am, and I am a genuinely happy person, I've in my life had times of melancholy. Just, some people call it anxiety, and sometimes it's anxiety, but I would just say melancholy would be the accurate description of it. And when I'm feeling like that, I really do have to sit down and get something that's neutral. And for me, that's a piece of paper and a pen, and just write down what is true. And what helps me get through it, in addition to that, is realizing how many people in books, particularly the Bible or other books that I've read, the characters that had experienced what I'm experiencing at that time, and that they got through it. And then every story, every great story, there appeared something to help them get through, a person or a ring, or there's something that helps them get through it, right? And that's really what I have to do in those periods of time when I really feel, what I'd always just describe as melancholy.
I like that a lot. And your own journey, one of the individuals that kind of has impacted my life is this guy, Joseph Campbell, who essentially did all this research around mythologies around the globe and put it all together. This is back in the early 90s, I think. And he has this great show on PBS back at the time called Hero of a Thousand Faces. He also wrote a book called The Power of Myth. And the show was with this guy, Bill Moyer, at Skywalker Ranch. And the reason why is that all this research that Joseph Campbell did influenced the creators of Star Wars. And it's looking at this journey. And that's what I hold on, when I try to kind of change my beliefs and get out of that fear-based, failure-based culture, is to say all the greatest, folks that we idolize, we think about, oh my gosh, they all go through the highs and then the deep lows. And that's, to me, I think is the most greatest thing that I really like to hear more about. It's like, what was that point at the bottom? And then how do they come back up? And so I find myself asking a lot of folks, in these deep conversations, especially at Burning Man, of course, is, tell me about stories of like how you picked yourself back up. Like, what was that? Because now, that's without picking yourself back up, the journey ends. And that's, to me, where that mind shift, the mindset, that perspective shift is the only way we're going to get through this, and that's also where I would love it for more of us, to not only, model that ourselves, because that's what our kids are that's what the future generations, the younger kids, are looking at, but also to hear stories from, in the next 20 years, there will be over 2 billion individuals that are considered senior citizens. So because the baby boomers are retiring, and there's never been a time where, we have to really get that knowledge and those stories, because they've lived through some pretty challenging times.
No, that's a great point, and I want to touch on a couple of things you said, Vince, and also some things Erica was just saying. Talking about how she looks at it when she's challenging those beliefs, the fear, the feeling associated with it versus the truth, and writing that out, I think, is a key thing to do, because the feeling that you have, and that goes back to what Chris was saying earlier too about the just between his ears is where a lot of the challenge is, and that's where sometimes when you're dealing with those kind of challenges and you want to challenge those limiting beliefs, you have to listen to your instinct, your gut. What does it tell you, from a feeling standpoint versus what's processing up here, and then learn to trust that piece of it too. And that's not an easy thing to do, but that's a big part of it, I think, to be able to challenge where you are limited or why you're being limited, and then have confidence and faith and trust in what the heart and what the gut is telling you versus those gears that are running in your brain, which a lot of the times are not just fear-based, but the brain is doing the job that it's supposed to do, and that's to keep you safe, to keep you comfortable. That's its primary function, right? So getting beyond that and getting past that, I think, is a key component of it. So that being said, obviously, we want to kind of talk about how we've done that. We've done some of the work and the work never stops, because as we talked about earlier when we first started this, 90+% of people have some type of limiting beliefs. As Erica says, she's never met someone, in her opinion, that does not have some kind of limiting belief. So there's always work to be done to continue to knock down those walls. So we've talked about challenging them, dealing with the feeling of it versus the truth, and really focusing on what is true. But now let's talk about how do we then replace those beliefs? What can we do, or what have you guys done for yourselves to push one out and then push something in there that's more positive, more supportive, and actually moving you in the right direction? Chris, I'll start with you, and then we'll go with everyone else. But what have been some of your experiences or some of the things you've done? And I know, Chris, you've been working on this quite a bit the last few years to really reframe what's going on, as you said, between your ears.
Well, I think I think the starting place is, I think and I'll just use our age group. You have goals. I have goals. I think everybody on this panel has goals. So it starts with the goals. Um, it also starts with your self-awareness of understanding that you have limiting beliefs. I've understood this for more time than I can even count. But setting those realistic goals, one of the things I lean into is the support factor. And when I was thinking, I got a million thoughts running through my head about this right now. But one of the things I've made it a point to is having the right support around me. So the right people. There's two phrases. You're only as good as you're as good as what you eat, and you're as good as the people you surround yourself with. Or the expression is, you are what you eat, and you're only as good as the people you have surrounding you. So I work on what I eat and who I have around me. I don't have, the days of, there's always one or two people that are going to tell you whatever you want to hear, because they're always working their agenda every day. But a lot of the people I have around me, I'm very fortunate. I have two of the people that are around me a lot is Erica and Brian. These are some of my pillar support. You guys are my pillar support people. You're a group of about 5 or 6 that I know I can count on. That we're, as Vinny likes to say, we're accountability partners, stuff like that. I like people that challenge me every once in a while. I don't want you to sit there and just agree with everything I say. If there's a nugget or a kernel of something, you're like, let me ask him about that. I want you to ask me, even though it makes me uncomfortable sometimes. Being questioned makes me uncomfortable. But I have learned to use that as a tool to get better. So in the past, I would run for that, or you automatically go defensive. I'm going to get defensive. I'm going to try to disprove what you've asked me about. Now what it does is it evokes a conversation. I want to have a conversation with, because there's a part of me says, well, I'm giving you the credit that you actually are on my level, or you're listening to what I have to say, and you'd like for me to do well. So typically the people I've got around me today, I know in my heart of hearts, they want me to do well on whatever level it is. But it has to start with a conversation. What was I doing here? There was something I was doing the other day, and somebody questioned me, and I got all, I had some anxious, I was having anxious moments, right? I had to take a deep breath and say, this is not, because the first thing we think of, this is a personal attack on me, right? They're attacking me. And then I was like, but no. That's actually somebody that I actually trust. So you kind of have to, remember I said earlier, we immediately go to the negative. So it's ingrained. I mean, you literally have that ingrained in your brain to go negative. All of a sudden, this person I thought was my ally is attacking me. No, they're questioning you. No, they're trying to get a little more deeper understanding as to what it is that makes you tick, or why you feel a certain way about a certain subject. So you got to pull all that stuff out of you. I'm going to say one more. I'm very blessed to be able to be a part of this platform. I say that, Brian. We've talked about that off camera. Talked to Vinny about that off camera. I've never talked to you about that off camera, Erica, because I've never been off camera with you. But the reality is, I feel very blessed to be on this platform. And I'll let you in on a little secret. Whenever the topics come, we start talking about doing a podcast and what the subject matter is, I immediately get hit with this anxiety, because I'm back into getting in my own way, thinking I'm not good enough. The overarching is, I think my opinion, nobody wants to hear my opinion. That's what ends up driving me in the wrong direction. Is I think, why would anybody want to listen to me? I'm just one guy. I'm from Lincoln Heights, Ohio, a little podunk town in Ohio. And why would anybody want to listen to what I was saying? I've actually broke it down to something that makes it very easy. It makes it easier for me to be able to get on this stage. I'm trying to get one person to listen to me. That's the goal I set to begin with. If I can get 1 to 5 people to listen to me, it was a win-win all the way around. So it's not, we're in a world of they call clicks and likes and subscribes and all that other kind of happy stuff, right? I just want one person to listen. I want to help one person who is like me, who suffers from the same things that I suffer from. I want that one person. You can raise your hand and say, hey, I mean, not our group. That one person comes and say, hey, Chris, you help me out. Or not. But the reality is, in my mind, as long as I know that it's, that's such an attainable goal for me, one person. One day somebody rolled up on me and said, Chris, I've been listening to your podcast for the last year or whatever it is. And I want to tell you, I appreciate you. If that day comes, I'm winning. I'm telling you, I'm winning. Yeah. And mission accomplished. And I'll use that as fuel to take me forward.
100%. Erica, what about you? Chris, thanks for sharing that. What have you had to do to, as we said, get out of your own way, get over yourself, and really push yourself forward with some of your limiting beliefs?
Sure. Well, first I want to respond to what Chris was saying, because let me tell you, I have friends that watch our videos, and they share with me, well, yeah, I really can relate to what Chris is saying. I'm like, I want to say, hey, what about me? But they are telling me that, they've watched them and they say that they really appreciate what you've shared, Chris, because there's so many people who really feel exactly how you feel. And they're grateful that you're sharing that, because they're not expressing it out loud, but when they hear you say it, it really hits home for them. Yeah. And they sincerely appreciate it. They really do. And then for me, so you've been a real blessing to a lot of the people I know here in Texas. So thank you for that. So and then for me, what I do to kind of challenge that, really, I have to sometimes take that time out just by myself. I really do. And then this might sound very basic to you all, but I have to make flashcards, and I sometimes will buy pre-made cards, affirmation cards, that I'll read them, and I have them in my purse. And sometimes I will be in the car. Sometimes, some days I might have them in my briefcase. I might pull them out at the courthouse and I'll read them. And it's the things that are the truth. So I'll just repeat it to myself. Like when you're a child, and your mom or your dad might have made you a flashcard to learn, multiplication, or learn addition, or learn your alphabet. That's what I do. I write down what is true. I write down things that are positive, and then I'll pull them out and I'll read them to myself, just like I'm learning. And it's what you feed your mind, and you repeat that to yourself repetitively, that starts sinking into your head, and then it goes down into your spirit until you start feeling it. A lot of what we feed ourselves is what we start acting on. And if we feed ourselves positive things, then our natural reaction will be to have that positive reaction based upon what we've fed into our subconscious. That's what I do that I found really helpful. The other thing that I've done is prayer. Some people may call it meditation. Some people may call it a whole bunch of other things, but really just taking that time out and being quiet. There's a type of prayer that people call centering prayer. In centering prayer, you go somewhere and it's totally quiet. You don't have on music. You sit there and quiet, and you allow yourself to be still. To start it off, it can be very hard because it's hard to train the mind to be silent. But you sit and start it off 2 minutes, start it off 3 minutes, 5 minutes. And then in time, people progress it to 15, and then they progress it to 30. And it's amazing how calming it is to sit still. And you have to make an appointment with yourself to do that. And you have to hold everybody in your household accountable to know that you are not to be disturbed during that time. That's your time. And that helps to calm the spirit. And like I said before, I have also suffered or experienced, it's another phrase, I guess, melancholy or in periods of time, anxiety. And that, besides breathing techniques, that's a way to kind of calm yourself before your day even starts, or to calm yourself when your day is about to end. And it's about being in quiet so that you can calm what's going on right here. So those are a few things that I do to help challenge, help challenge and to control those types of negative thoughts.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that. And I want to chime in there. And then, Vinny, I'm going to come to you. So it's a couple of things I heard, Erica, that I thought are very powerful as far as getting over your limiting beliefs. And the last piece about getting centered or recentering yourself with a prayer or call it meditation prayer, but whatever works for you and your belief system. But that is, I think, a critical piece to have that time to yourself to really do that and get recentered. And then the other part where you talked about the flashcards and different things like that. What's really powerful about that for me, especially the ones where you write for yourself, that is kind of you have to be aware enough, first of all, to think through what's going to be written on the card, so that there's a process that you're going through from an awareness standpoint to A, write the card out, and then B, the reinforcement that you have of that as you read that card again, and then read that card again, and then read that card again. So you're really training yourself and teaching yourself a new belief and pushing one out and moving in the new one. And I think that's a very, very powerful tool. It's interesting you say flashcards, and it's elementary, but it's a very, very powerful tool. And I really do appreciate that. So, Vince, with your thoughts, what do you have to share as far as that goes?
I resonate really well with what Eric and Chris were saying, and as you're saying, the flashcards is really that quote, to think it, to believe it, to become it. And if we surround ourselves, and do you guys have friends who are, or have you met folks that are kind of energy vampires? Energy vampires. And you just like you hang out with them and you're just like, whoa, you just feel exhausted and you feel irritated and angry and whatnot. And it's definitely something where at least today, I try to change my mindset, and I'm still working on it. But if you can handle an energy vampire, and you can kind of shift, it's like this Japanese Aikido move where you kind of take that negative energy and change it away and have empathy for the individual and whatnot. But I'm still working on that one. But going back to my first comment as we opened about how to deal with things like this, I've got my little Stoic cheat sheet, and of course, we talked about this. When you have these thoughts of negativity, the first thing is awareness. Okay, so your mindset is changing. So recognizing that is the first step, of course, and that's like 95% of it. And then it says, what is making you feel this way? And not to the degree of like trying to figure out, like, let's get to the root cause, whatnot. But it's just almost like, okay, just sitting with it, being okay with it, that's totally fine. And then, trying to see what's actually underlying issues. Because I would say in my experience, majority of the times that I'm getting triggered, it's not what's happening. It's maybe something that is totally, indirectly connected, or it's a childhood trauma that we have, and then, a lot of it is like, is it because of how you feel others are viewing you, how they see you? Is it that they, going back to the imposter syndrome mention that Chris said, or the flip side of it, is this how you see yourself, where you're not, you have to maintain that level of, and then I would say a lot of times those issues are, I find, control-based. Those anger, those challenges, those whatever. It's either I'm trying to control or someone's trying to control me. So I'm still learning. It's funny because all the great sages have always talked about meditation and prayer and whatnot. And I'm like, I need to do more of that. And I always acknowledge it, but it's just always like, ah.
Yeah, I agree with you on that 100%. So let's bring this to a close. I'll kind of get to what I'm going to call final thoughts. And from a final thought standpoint, have each one of us kind of share with our audience the one thing that you would want them to take away that you think would be of value to really help them work their way through this journey of replacing some of those limiting beliefs with more positivity, something that's definitely a truth and not just a feeling or something that they feel has been placed on them by someone else, to really help them down that road from the journey. So I'll come to you first, Erica, and then we'll have Chris share his, and then Vinny and I'll wrap this up for today.
Sure. Believe in what is true. You'll have a lot of thoughts that rush through your head. And if you notice, they kind of come and they're based upon making you afraid, because deep down inside, you actually know that you're good. You know that you're valuable, but something in the universe is sending those negative things into your brain just to keep you distracted from what your real purpose in the universe is. So don't give power to something that's coming in to try to destroy you, when you know, when you were born, when you were created, you were made for a particular reason. And as long as you can say to that negative, hey, you can't touch this, you'll be able to fulfill your destiny. But you're the one that has the power to make that decision. Nobody else can make that decision for you.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Erica. Chris, what about you?
Well, like I said, one of the things when we came into this was I think I led in with having goals. I don't know how to describe it. We're all at that age where I'm actually thinking about retirement, you know what I mean? Which is something that I never thought about before. But over this last 3 to 6 months, I've been starting to think about what do I want when I get to that level? And I'm starting to figure it out. And it actually is I won't say it's making it easier for me, but because I'm starting to form the belief, and I'm starting to be able to see what it is that I want in that next life, that next piece of my life. It's easier to really form my actions around those goals. So the challenge is which is one of my Achilles is I think everybody's judging me every day I go out into the street. So when I encounter new people, or even the people that I deal with, I in the back of my mind, that no negativity saying, so what do they really think about me? And that's not fair to me. And it's definitely not fair to the people that have supported me. But unfortunately, that's the dynamic. And that's the dynamic that I'm trying to put to rest every day. Like I said, I mentioned that earlier, up and including when we do these podcasts, I'm wondering, for first and foremost, I'm in lofty company. So the people that I'm with are absolutely magnificently wonderful people that have a lot of knowledge and a lot of wisdom and a lot of caring. The other part of it is I feel a lot of caring and love in this room with you folks. So using that as fuel to move forward is what I try to do every day, trying to reinforce that. I keep thinking about, we've talked about my swimming. I'm the swimmer. I don't know what you guys call me behind closed doors, but the swimming thing, I've thought about this. So I go Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday. And so Thursday was it was a weird week for me. I've been having some mental and emotional challenges about, my insecurities. And I really part of me did not want to go swim on Thursday, but part of me knew that I needed to go swim. So it was forcing myself out the door into that process, because it's a process. It's an activity with a process. So getting out there and then ultimately getting into the water. One of the beauties of swimming is I don't carry my phone. So there's about an hour where nobody can get a hold of me unless you come out into the water. Unless you come and find me in the water, you can't get a hold of me. And I'm actually growing to like that. This is the one way I get to purposefully unplug. And I think a lot of people need to purposefully unplug. Yes, we're all busy. Yes, we got stuff we're trying to do. Yes, we're trying to get to those levels that we want to get to. But I'm starting to place such an importance on that unplug, because it allows me to recenter, refocus, and get some of my thoughts together. Erica, you're talking about praying and meditation. Well, when I'm out in the water, it's the church of the reef. That's what I call it. So I'm out there praying. And like I said, my biggest thing is especially if I'm having a bad, quote unquote, bad day, I just want to see a turtle. That's all I want. Can I see a turtle? I haven't been in the droves out there lately, but I saw my turtle. I've seen my turtle every time I've gone out. And it's just to have that experience. I'm going to guess everybody's been in the water and seen a turtle before, but to see that in nature, it's priceless. It's priceless for me. My energy levels rise about 20% after I do that swim. And if I'm so fortunate to see a turtle, I'm like, mission accomplished. Thank you, Lord. I always look up. I'm like, thank you, Lord. So just trying to find things that you can attach yourself to that are going to further your journey in life is what I think some people should try to focus on.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that story, Chris. Vince, what about you? What would you like to share with our folks kind of as a takeaway?
Yeah, just know you're not alone. Clearly, all of us have had these experiences, and we will always continue to. So just, reaching out, finding that community. There's a lot of great groups out there, and, you got to be a little vulnerable and put yourself out there. But the great thing about this is that, it always does work out.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I want to share a little bit of a story, and Mitch, you just used the word vulnerable. In my teens, definitely into my 20s, I was that person to, talk about even photography. I never wanted to be in front of a camera. I didn't want to be in a picture. Just one of those places I was not comfortable. And so talking about getting past a limiting belief and considering what I'm sitting here doing right now, that's been a lifelong lesson of, as you say, you have to look at the truths of it and say, why am I afraid to do this or to do that? Where's that fear coming from? And sometimes the only way you can actually get past it is to actually just go straight at it. Right. And just take that challenge head on and put yourself literally in a place of discomfort. So getting in front of the camera, me sitting here now, having this conversation, speaking into this camera, talk to the world, literally, as we talk about with the internet, is something that, 20 years ago just probably wasn't going to happen, just only because of the discomfort and how my beliefs of not thinking that either what I had to share was valuable or not, how was I going to be judged in doing so, et cetera, et cetera. So just do it. As the brand out there says, just do it. And not only just do it, but learn or start to focus on the not caring piece of it, meaning don't care what others say, don't care what they think, because as Vince talked about earlier when we kind of started this, what do you have control over? You have control over your action, or what I term your input to the thing. The output on the other side of it, you actually don't have any control over. So focus on your input, the effort you put in, and I think that's going to make the greatest difference. Just focus on that. Let that be what pushes you forward, is focusing on that piece of it. And don't worry so much about the output and the judgment and what other people's thoughts and concerns and whatever else that they may have, because you can't control where that's going to play out anyway. So use that energy wisely and put it, I think, where it really is going to make the greatest difference. So that's all we have for today. This was great. Thanks everyone for sharing your stories and kind of talking about, your own personal limiting beliefs and the steps we've taken to get over some. And do we still have some? Yeah, probably so. So the battle goes on, and as we're raising kids and grandkids and whatever else happens, we'll have to help guide them as well through the process of getting past limiting beliefs, because as we started this whole thing today, 95% of people have them. So it's a common thing. It's a common thread I think we share, but we need to continue to support and help and guide each other as best we can toward the positive and moving forward. So thank you guys for today. I really appreciate it. And until next time, everyone, Chris, you got something you want to wrap up with?
Yeah, I just want to add in one last thing. I thought of this is, and the other thing is, we all have our share of challenges when it comes to traveling through our travels in life. But the one thing the thing that I work on is there are always going to be missteps along the way in your travels and how you deal with people and the whole 9 yards. Be authentic. Be convicted in that authenticity. Be convicted to who you are and what you're about. The goodness will come through. I mean, like I said, you're going to make missteps. You're going to misspeak. You can't do everything the way sometimes people thinking you should do it. But I always believe that if the agenda is clean, if you're steeped in truth and authenticity, then all the rest of the stuff that's what will shine through. Everything else will fall to the wayside. Even that, if I said something wrong here today, it's like, oh, he said that, and people disagreed with me. But I think at the end of it, if you look at the body of work, that guy's authentic here. He's speaking from the heart. I always speak from the heart. I know that gets me in trouble every once in a while, but that's who I am. Love it or like it, or dislike it. That's who I am. And most of my friends know that about me, that I'm authentic. Yeah. But that doesn't mean I'm going to always say the right thing.
All right, Chris, thanks for sharing that. Authenticity is a very, very important piece of it. And being authentic with yourself and the self-awareness of all of that is also very important. Everyone, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Get out, enjoy. For our audience out there, take care of each other. We'll see you soon. Bye now.